Ever wondered what the world thought after every killer was taken by the entity? What did they believe happened to all of these horrible people with their sudden disappearances? It was pretty mysterious after all and happened all over the world. Today let's take a look at what the world believed happened to each of the killers. Trapper was taken after massacring his workers and killing his father. The Macmillan estate is noted to have been investigated after this happened too, as Trapper's killings are widely known as the worst mass murder in modern history. Despite this, it's never proven it was specifically Evan's doing, and so Evan's lack of presence could lead to a few outcomes. 1. Evan is believed to be simply dead. 2. Evan is responsible and is on the run. I think the second option is a bit more likely, with him never being found. Wraith is fairly similar to Trapper in the sense that he commits a murder, killing his boss Azarov, and then is never seen again. The lore simply states that he left and was never seen again. I assume therefore that Philip is still believed to be out there, somewhere, fleeing law enforcement and remaining under the radar. There's no evidence after all to suggest he was injured or killed. I could see this being a news story and the world even knowing about it too, knowing that he's out there missing. Billy is an interesting case as he was raised by his parents but was hidden from the world due to his disfigured appearance. The only people who were even aware of Billy's existence were his parents and a sheriff or chief and his deputies, all of which Billy kills during the Coldwind Massacre. This means there is essentially no record at all of Billy, so his disappearance will not be noted. However, Coldwind Farm is later found with disemboweled animals strewn across it, and the bodies of Billy's parents, Max and Evelyn Thompson, never being found. It's seen as a mysterious occurrence. Coldwind is sold, yet the farmhouse appears to be haunted to some degree, with a chainsaw being heard on summer nights. Therefore I could see Billy being remembered as an urban legend of some kind, even if his existence is essentially unknown. Nurse is a far simpler case to the others, I think, with her crashing on the way to a hospital, with the ambulance being destroyed and Sally likely being presumed dead. This all happening just after her massacre. She is noted to be missing, so possibly she's believed to have survived and be either on the run, or a more supernatural approach could occur, and she'd become an urban legend of some kind, haunting the asylum. I think she's probably just presumed dead though, honestly. Myers I think is simply presumed to still be out there. The lore doesn't pinpoint the exact point he's taken, but my assumption has always been it's at the end of Halloween when he disappears. If this is the case, he'd simply be assumed to still be out there, present, and on the run, ready to strike again. The legend of the boogeyman presumably grows too. Hag was likely presumed dead long ago after she was captured by the villagers. Weeks pass with Lisa being imprisoned. When the search party for Lisa finally arrives, they find all of the villagers dead and no sign of Lisa. They presume that an animal killed the villagers. There is a bit of a question mark over this though, as the search party also finds Hag's symbols, which she learnt from her own village's elders. Therefore it's actually possible the search party could have told the elders, and they'd be aware of what happened, that Lisa used the hexes, transformed into the hag, and slaughtered her captors, and now exists out in the swamp. Either death, or I think it's quite possible in Lisa's case, they know exactly what happened to her. Maybe not the wider world, but her villagers would do, I think. Doctor is another killer that the wider world likely knew very little about, as his entire existence was hidden as he worked for the CIA on the Larry's Black site. When he massacres Larry's and kills Otto and is subsequently nowhere to be found, the wider world won't know, but the CIA are probably freaking out, especially with all the sensitive information he had. They'd perform a huge cover-up more than likely and be on a constant hunt to try and find his whereabouts. In the original lore, which is still viewable on the wiki, it was mentioned that the government redacted everything that occurred at Larry's, and the entire thing was covered up. Therefore, Doctor's existence is essentially unknown to the wider world. Huntress, we have quite an explicit account of what happened to her. At the end of her lore, it's noted that as war sweeps through the Red Forest, surrounding villages flee, and with them the legend of the Huntress, with it being left to rest in the forest. Therefore, Huntress's existence or end is simply unknown by the wider world, a forgotten Legend. Bubba is taken just after the events of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre, being taken as he spins outside the family house just after Sally escapes him. In this moment, Bubba fears what will happen to his family and what they will do to him. It's possible that Bubba was unknown to the wider world, with everyone who came to the house being killed, and the only surviving account being that of Sally. Bubba is likely presumed dead by his family's hands, on the run, or simply an urban legend, a horror story created by Sally. Freddy is already presumed dead, and so the world's perspective on him doesn't really change. He's likely still presumed dead, with the remaining parents of the children who were killed possibly being aware he may be out there, but being unable to tell anyone without sounding crazy. So at best, he's a legend of some kind. At worst, he's just presumed dead. Pig was shot and would have died had she not been taken. She is likely simply presumed dead still, although the few people in the room who witness her disappearance would likely be very freaked out. They would think she's dead regardless though, I think, with it being a deadly wound. The wider world would think the same with her blood being found at the crime scene. She'd simply be reported dead, I imagine. Clown is likely presumed to be on the run still, with him already being hunted and on the run after one of his victims escaped his caravan and binds. The circus is said to bear down on him, and Clown flees into the night with Maurice. He's likely presumed to still be out there, hiding and waiting to strike again. I imagine circus communities in particular would be fearful of his potential appearance. His killings may also eventually be connected together and televised possibly. Spirit is almost definitely presumed dead after she was attacked and cut up by her father. Whilst her body may be missing, her blood likely remains throughout the estate, and her father survives, allowing him to recount what happened. Her disappearance, if televised, could spark theories however that she did become an Onryo, although this would largely be a conspiracy theory over anything believable. Legion are likely known throughout Ormond and possibly more widely, with it being known that they were responsible for the killing of Carl the Clerk. The immediate assumption from Legion's parents are that the four of them ran away, following Frank. The lore does mention that each family came up with a different theory. Once the body is found, it says the mood changed, which makes me think the town either believes they ran away with Frank, fleeing the consequences of their crime, or Frank also killed the other three members. There are many stated theories, so the world would have a much muddier view of what happened to the four of them. I do think that's possible though. They think that Susie, Joey, and Julie are dead by the hands of Frank. Plague is more than likely presumed dead, with her last being seen by her people leaving Babylon and going on a pilgrimage in search of help. Herself and a few of her followers end up in a cave, slowly dying. It's quite likely they all end up dying here, as the plague is very deadly. Interestingly, the lore does mention that Adiris's body is never recovered, but neither are her followers' bodies, suggesting they were all taken by the entity. A good theory is that her followers back at Babylon actually did believe Adiris and those followers ascended to the realm of their god, or what they believed their god to be, with the stated, "many told tales of her return." Alternately, they likely believe she died of the plague and her body was simply not found. Ghostface is likely presumed to still be out there, hiding and awaiting, ready to strike again. Before he was taken, Ghostface, or Jed Olson, had just been exposed in the Roseville Gazette for his string of killings. He then plans to pack and leave before the fog appears and takes him from his apartment. He accepts this willingly and gratefully. The world therefore likely believes he's still out there. There's more than likely a statewide or possibly a nationwide manhunt to try and find Jed or Danny, with him presumed to be living under a new alias, and ready to terrorize another town. Demogorgon is a tough one, as we don't even know which demo DBD's one is. We just get a generic description of what a Demogorgon is for the lore. Therefore my best guess is, if it's the Season 1 demo, is that the world presumes it's dead after 11 kills it. If it's the later Season 3 demo, in the prison, then they likely assume it escaped and possibly returned to the Upside Down. Oni is likely presumed dead after an army essentially of people raised up to take him down with everyday tools like pitchforks, scythes, and clubs. Kazan is soon defeated and left to bleed out in a stone mill. He's left for a period in pain, before the villagers return to find that he's been absorbed by a fog. The lore states this was the beginning of a dark legend about a rageful Oni haunting the town. So we have a pretty explicit account of what the world believes in this case. They not only witnessed the fog that took him, but also assume something supernatural occurred, and he became a literal Oni, after being called Oni Yamaoka for most of his life, or his pilgrimage days, I suppose. Deathslinger is taken after quite a big event, as he incites a riot at Hellshire Penitentiary, causing the deaths of the Warden and Henry Bayshaw. He then returns to his old cell where a fog consumes him. As everyone was distracted, it's unlikely anyone saw where Caleb went, and presumed he just left probably. In Zarina's lore, she begins to investigate his disappearance further, and with her subsequent disappearance, it's actually quite possible that Caleb's true reason for disappearance could be uncovered, especially as Zarina's own disappearance is televised on the Jane Romero show. In his time, Caleb is likely presumed to have fled and to be living out somewhere hiding from the law, or just dead. In the future though, in Zarina's time, it's quite likely that his disappearance is investigated, and possibly even televised as mysterious. Pyramid Head was not even known to the wider world, as he was a creation of Silent Hill from James's mind. Therefore, by the end of Silent Hill 2, James likely presumes Pyramid Head is vanquished, essentially, gone. The wider world would never even know of his existence. Blight is almost definitely presumed dead by the wider world, as his last true connection to it was through the East India Company and his work there during the Opium War. After the war and him being thrown into a mass grave, he goes on to join a secret monastery and likely is presumed dead beyond this point and to have died in the mass grave. The monastery would be the only people more than likely who would know that he didn't die there, instead mysteriously disappearing on Dire Island years later after his mind had truly crumbled. Twins are forever hunted throughout their lore, and Charlotte is on the brink of freezing to death when the vision of Victor appears to her. Therefore, with her out in the cold wilderness, she is likely presumed dead due to the cold or environment. The lack of a body wouldn't be all too surprising, with her whereabouts being forever changing. Some may still believe Charlotte to be out there though, a legend of the nearby woods. Trickster is taken at the end of his magnum opus performance, just before he's able to kill Yun-Jin. He does however manage to brutally kill the rest of the Mighty One board members, leaving behind a very bloody crime scene. The disappearance of both Ji-Woon and Yun-Jin would likely lead the world to believe the two of them were working together though, and killed the board members as one, and all the other people for Trickster's music. Yun-Jin's DNA would be present at the scene after all, yet her body or blood would not be. This would be a huge worldwide case too, and so I could see there being a nationwide manhunt for the two of them ensuing, maybe even worldwide. Nemesis was already a secret that was only known by Umbrella, and so his existence would not be known to the wider world, especially with Raccoon City being nuked. It's likely assumed by Umbrella therefore that he was killed by Jill or the Raccoon City nuke, with the telemetry data being the only thing that was saved. Pinhead is sort of a twofold one, as there is himself as Elliot Spencer, then also himself as the Hellpriest Cenobite Pinhead. Elliot Spencer is likely presumed dead, with him disappearing after opening the box during the First World War, probably just down to being a casualty of the war, is what people would think. Pinhead may be a different case, with the wider world being largely unaware of the Cenobites, but Kirsty Cotton surviving her encounter with them in Hellraiser, an encounter she may share with the wider world if anyone would believe her. Artist is a little interesting, as she did have a degree of fame as an artist. She disappears at the Eyrie of Crows, her hands and tongue severed by the Black Veil, and her friends killed. Carmina is seemingly presumed dead here, as the fog takes her soon after. Jonah's lore establishes that Carmina's disappearance is a cold case, with bodies being found, eaten by hundreds of crows. This is where it's left though, suggesting the case isn't closed by the CIA however, meaning it's probably made the news and is also being actively investigated still, meaning it's of interest to the CIA. This could also be down to the Black Veil being a part of the CIA though, in some timelines. The wider world though likely knows she's been murdered. Sadako is likely simply presumed dead by the wider world and has been for decades. She's been down the well for a long time, and there's no reason really for people to change their minds. She did begin to kill again, it's true, and few people believed she had returned, such as Yuichi, but no one believed them really, meaning the wider world is largely ignorant to the truth. She is dead to their knowledge, and has been for years. Dredge's only surviving witness was Otto Stamper, who was later killed by Herman Carter the Doctor. Dredge consumed the entire Garden of Joy and its residents, leaving it completely unknown to the wider world aside from the urban legend of the Drewani. Wesker is taken moments before his Ouroboros plan is enacted, and so his sudden disappearance is likely quite alarming, but presumed to be him going into hiding. I don't think any case on him is just going to be closed, or any presumption made that he's dead. when he was that close to destroying the world. I think he's presumed to be in hiding, on the run, and waiting to strike again sometime. The wider world may not know about Wesker, however, as he largely does remain secret though. Knight and his guards are presumed dead, I think. Their final act is to face down an army of good who attempt to rid their evil from Port Oscuro. They do, however, mysteriously disappear mid-fight though in a fog, which may raise alarm bells for some, especially once they find the strange markings in Vittorio's cell. Either they're presumed dead, or people do believe there was supernatural interference of some kind. But due to the times, news like this probably wouldn't spread all too quickly, and people would soon simply forget, I imagine, with there being a few records noted down. Skull Merchant is another character who may make wider news, with her being a very wealthy business owner. It's likely too that due to her base of operations being left behind in the Rio woods, and her unable to cover her tracks of her secret identity of the Skull Merchant being revealed. I could even imagine that she'd get a number of documentaries made about it, with it being quite shocking news. Her disappearance would be known and likely set down to her many crimes. She'd be presumed in hiding or on the run, or possibly just dead, eventually taking on a fight she couldn't win or something. Singularity was likely never known to the wider world, and instead the massacre on Devaka is set down to some kind of alien on the planet that killed the crew. No transmissions got out after all, meaning Hux and his gained sentience was likely never recorded or known by anyone other than the Devaka crew. Xenomorph similarly was known and discovered by the Nostromo crew, and they're all dead, along with Ripley, the only survivor, also being in the realm. This means that the world wasn't even aware of Xeno, especially after the Nostromo itself is also destroyed. Chucky is already considered dead, or sort of an urban legend in a sense. Charles Lee Ray, after all, was literally shot and recorded as dead. Chucky as a doll was ridiculed as an idea, and those who reported it were seen as crazy. Therefore the wider world, especially at the point of Chucky 2, when he's taken, would never know. Unknown was also always an urban legend or a myth, and so its disappearance likely doesn't make much difference. Greenville is still on an overlap, and freaky things will still occur regardless of Unknown's presence. Even with Unknown gone, the world will still pin many acts onto it, I imagine. Unknown's perception doesn't change, I think. No one could confirm it was there to begin with, so no one can confirm it's gone, if that makes sense. Vecna is tentatively assumed dead, I imagine. After his disappearance and the famed journey of the bards to stop him, it's possible the world believes they actually succeeded. The rotted tower, although having an evil clinging to it, was empty. I do say this was tentatively believed though, because I think with Vecna, people would always assume he'd come back from death, even if he had died, so he may be presumed dead, but also he'd be presumed to be returning eventually. Dracula is actually basically the same too, I think. He'd be known to be dead for now, but I think the wider world would essentially be waiting on his eventual return, knowing it's inevitable that he'd be resurrected, with the lore even mentioning his frequent resurrections. Both either way would be these legends or horror stories of this returning, recurring villain almost. Houndmaster would likely be presumed dead, simply. Portia was a famed pirate after all, and so I think her sudden disappearance from a life of piracy wouldn't be that surprising, even with her reputation. She disappears on Molak, her enemy's island, with there seemingly being no other witnesses, aside Molak himself and maybe some crew, before they're taken into a fog. Maybe songs will be written about this, sea shanties, and all that kind of stuff. Legends and myths about the Houndmaster, but aside that, I think Portia is likely presumed dead, or maybe haunting the seas. Kaneki is likely assumed to have been killed by Jason or killed fighting Jason, with him disappearing just after he fights and devours him. The remaining scene of Jason and Kaneki's encounter could be interpreted in a few ways, but the most likely is that the two fought and both died, with neither body being present. Most would assume Kaneki would be the loser of this fight too, and so he is likely presumed dead at Jason's hands, or to possibly still be out there and hiding, potentially. Springtrap or William Afton is likely simply presumed dead after he is killed by the Springlocks in the Spring Bonnie suit in a back room of the pizzeria. It's unlikely he's presumed to have survived this by the wider world, especially after his body is blocked up and 3 decades pass. Afton is undoubtedly presumed simply dead by the Springlocks, or likely some other means. And to the wider world, I suppose, they would just believe he mysteriously disappeared and is dead at this point, with him being completely gone for 30 years. Alright, well, that's gonna do it. I do hope you enjoyed, thanks for watching, and goodbye.